Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Those of you who do not recognize me, my name is David King, and I'm going to be taking you through today's session, which is very aptly titled, What's Trust Got to Do with It? And I think it's a very I've used the word twice now, apt title, in light of the recent South African experience we've been through around our election. And I think currently the government of national unity is being put together, and we're waiting for the announcement of the new cabinet. So you can imagine behind the scenes how much trust-related challenges there must be. So I'm going to, as always, encourage you to please use the chat function. That's what it's there for, is to chat. So happy for you to have conversations in the chat, but also to plant any question that you may have. Happy to be interrupted if need be, if it's really urgent, you want to challenge me on something or question something. However, I will also, excuse me, I will also hopefully set aside some time at the end of the webinar for you to unpack or ask any questions. You will get the slide pack sent to you post the session. So please note that you will get the slides. And I look forward to unpacking this really important concept around trust, and hopefully that you will walk away with, as always, with an aha moment. You will take something from this and you will apply it. As you know, those of you who've attended my webinars before, I believe in being able to practically apply what we learn. It's all wonderful to have theory and knowledge, but if we don't do anything with it, it's pretty pointless. So let me share my slides, and welcome to everyone again from all over our country. Right, so that's the title of today's webinar, What's Trust Got to Do with It? And we're going to look at some research primarily around this concept of trust, and entertain the complexity of trust. So I wanted to start with the difference between complication and complexity. So complicated means it's difficult to understand. Complexity means there's more to it than we expect. So there's a lot of elements. That's what complexity means. And I think we underestimate the depth of the trust concept or the trust equation, what we're going to tackle. So why don't you start with this slide to remind us around the analogy of the iceberg, which I often use in many of my webinars and workshops. Excuse me. It's just to remind us that the tip of the iceberg is what we see and what the world sees of us and what we're comfortable to share. And as you all know, the majority of the iceberg lies under the water. And why it's so important to acknowledge this is that the reasons why we do what we do often stem from what's under the water. It's a lifelong journey. Yes.
Sorry. Can we please just confirm that everyone can hear you? Because it's a comment that came through from Sarah who says she cannot hear.
Sure. Sarah, do you want to try logging out in the game? Jackie, you good? You can hear me. Adrian logged in and logged out and is hopefully back on track. Okay, so let me share the screen again. So I'm going to keep on coming back to this because it's a quick reminder when we are tackling concepts that are perhaps new to us, or perhaps we don't necessarily want to deal with or face. Because in all likelihood, if we don't want to face it or deal with it, because it's probably the stuff under the water. And as I've said before, under the water, it's cold, it's dark, and it's unknown. And yet all our answers lie there. So it's a lifelong journey of us having to go and swim beneath the water and explore. So instead of fearing it, let's rather see it as an opportunity to grow, to get better, to acknowledge. And this is where we often need professional help to assist us in identifying what we need to tackle. So if I asked you this question, who in this session is not trustworthy? Okay, if we were all in having a face-to-face session and I asked the group who is not trustworthy, the chances are that nobody is going to raise their hand. Because trust seems to be one of those fundamentals that it's an expected minimum requirement when we engage or encounter another human being. And yet we all feel we're trustworthy, and potentially that other people are not. So there's something a tad warped in that, because if we all think we're trustworthy, then trust should not be an issue. So maybe digging deeper into what does trust actually mean might perhaps guide us further. I'm sure, as most of you know, trust is the foundation of any relationship. And it's the first one, it's your first go-to in ascertaining whether this is a healthy or an unhealthy relationship. Because if we cannot trust somebody in our personal lives and in our work lives, is a problem. In other words, we're never going to be able to give up our full self, or we are always going to be wary of the other person or the dynamic of that relationship. And I'm sure you can all cast your mind and think of somebody in your life where you battle with that relationship, and it might actually be trust related because of a past experience, or what we're going to discover, it may actually lie within you. It might have nothing to do with the other person. It might actually have something to do with you and your attitude, your approach, or your belief system regarding how trustworthy you are. So as always, I throw in a few thought-provoking quotes. When you fully trust someone without any doubt, you finally get one of two results: a person for life or a lesson for life. And why I like this is because you can do everything right, and you have no control over how the other person reacts or responds, as we've learned in previous webinars. So that's where you have to make that personal choice of going, and I'm going to continue in this relationship or this dynamic. Am I going, we've got a number of choices. We can either ignore it, pretend, or tackle it head on. Or was that a lesson in life? So instead of beating myself up about the poor decision I made in that relationship, work relationship, personal relationship, I see it as a lesson. In other words, what can I learn from it? You can't change another human being, unfortunately, as we've learned. No magic wand. So sometimes it boils down to making a personal life choice of saying it's over, or I'm prepared to live with it. And no one can tell you which choice to make because it's personal. So there are a few different variations of what we call the trust equation. But why the trust equation is so helpful? Because what it does, it shows us the depth and, as I said earlier, the complexity of trust. And I'm going to use an example, perhaps to better explain the trust equation, because I'm not a mathematician. So normally when I see an equation of any kind, I retreat. But it explains it very well. So trust is made up of credibility, reliability, intimacy, over self-orientation, which is really you, me. So let me use an analogy of a doctor. So when you are seeking a new doctor, for example, how do you ascertain whether this doctor has credibility? So the most obvious way would be that there is somebody that has recommended the doctor. Okay, so that's one way of ascertaining credibility. It could also be the diploma degree on the doctor's wall. But how many of you have gone and checked with the health council that that doctor's legitimate? I certainly haven't. But when you go into doctors' rooms, in most cases, general practitioner, there's the certificate on the wall, and that's an indication that they are qualified. But I haven't really gone and checked. Okay. Every now and again, you hear these scandals of someone imposing as an imposter as a doctor. But those are probably two ways of you ascertaining whether that that doctor is credible. Okay. Then let's look at reliability. How will you ascertain whether your general practitioner is reliable? Now, reliability means that I am able to access my GP when I need to. And if I phone for a doctor's appointment, hopefully the doctor is available to see me. And what I've experienced, maybe when it's come to a specialist, we normally need a specialist because it's urgent or it's highly important. But I have many times had to phone a specialist and be told, no, sorry, you can the next appointment is in 2027. Now, I understand that this person is an expert in their field, but I can't wait till 2027. So, and then my reliability flag is tested here because I need the specialist, but the specialist is not available. When you arrive at the doctor's for your doctor's appointment and you walk into the waiting room and there are lots of people sitting in the waiting room, then you know, here we go. We're going to be waiting for a while. My appointment was at 10 o'clock. I arrive at 5 to 10, but there are 3 people before me and I really realize I'm going to be waiting. Now that annoys you. You then deem that doctor as unreliable and potentially you're going to seek out a new doctor or a new specialist in light of those 2 examples that I gave you. Okay. The third component of the trust equation is intimacy. Okay, what intimacy means in this context is the relationship you have with that doctor. In other words, do you feel comfortable with that doctor? Does that doctor have bedside manner? So I do a lot of work with Netcare, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges they have in this example. So their doctors are credible and reliable, but when it comes to bedside manner, it ain't there. Some people don't have a problem with this. They'll say, but don't want to become my doctor or specialist best friend. I'm happy for my doctor to be credible and reliable and save my life. I don't want my doctor necessarily to be friendly. But guess what? Research shows from a healing perspective that when a doctor shows some care and empathy and compassion, we actually heal better. The environment in which we find ourselves, if it's compassionate and empathetic, we heal better. So there's actually science to say that intimacy is actually important. So, in other words, when you're sitting in the doctor's rooms, that you chat to your doctor about your ailment, and then you're chatting to your doctor about other stuff, about your children, maybe about your work environment, about stress. So you don't hold back because you feel comfortable to talk to that doctor. Okay. So look at those 3 words to start off with and think to yourself, which ones are important to me? All of them, 2 of them, or 1 of them, or none of them. Unlikely, none of them. But I just want you to start, I want to plant the seed in your head that some may be more important to you than others. Okay. And some are non-negotiables. So that's the top part of the trust equation. Over self-orientation. Now, in this instance, when we refer to self-orientation, we're talking about what we contribute towards trust. So what David contributes towards trust. So yes, the other person, I expect the other person to be credible, reliable, and intimate. But what role am I playing? Because I'm not passive in this. I'm actively involved in a relationship. So I myself come with a whole lot of baggage or a whole lot of stuff. As we've learned in previous webinars, I arrive on this earth as a clean slate. Yes, I've got some genetic stuff along with me, but my beliefs, my morals, my values, my culture, my upbringing, my lived experience will define me. It doesn't have to limit you, but it will impact you and influence how you see the world around you. So you, on top of what we've learned about credibility, reliability, and intimacy, is your ability for your contribution to any relationship. I just want to pause here before I tackle the research on this topic. If you've got any questions, please feel free to type them in. Otherwise, I'm going to continue unpacking and hopefully wow you further when it comes to the complexity of trust. So there are 5 essentials of trust, and I'm going to look at each of these briefly, but I think from my research on this topic, these are profoundly impactful in helping me to better understand trust. In other words, it helped me realize what's important to me and perhaps what's not important to me. And in some ways, what's even more important is how other people see me or view me. So the research that I'm going to cover is by Dr. Henry Cloud, who's written a wonderful book about trust. Some of you hopefully have come across it already. I just want to read this quote. Trust is the currency that drives every relationship, beginning with the foundational bond between infants and their mothers, extending to the trust networks that undergird every human endeavor, art, science, commerce, and binding together every relationship we have ever had or ever will have. Nothing in our world works without trust. How's that for a statement? So that's why I can say it's a core fundamental in a human being. So from a neuroscience perspective, we are hardwired for connection. And part of that connection is we are desperately seeking out that we can trust or connect with another human being. Now let's look at the first fundamental of trust. So once you think of each one of these, think of whether they're important to you or not, and also perhaps rate yourself too from this component. Okay, so your personal rating here. So the first one is understanding. You can trust someone when you feel your needs are understood, felt, or cared about. So in this image, we talk a lot about mirroring. We mirror each other's feelings and emotions, and that's why we pick up energies around other people. So one of the one of the key fundamentals is we tend to trust somebody more if we sense that they are listening to us and they are actively listening to us. They're not passively listening to us. Now, how do you know when someone's actively listening to us? Is that they are leaning into when we speak. They are engaged. From a body language perspective, they are giving us eye contact. They are not interrupting us, and that they are not judging what we say. Also, there's a lot of work going on there. So as that quote says, yeah, listen to understand, not to reply. And that is often what we tend to battle with, is that we want to respond, we want to react when somebody is speaking to us instead of just listening to understand. It is a skill. And I run workshops just on listening because it's such a powerful concept to understand and to grasp. You can pick up very easily when somebody's not listening to you. How do we know that as humans? We pick it up because somebody is distracted. They are not looking at us. They're looking away. They are on, I'm looking for my phone. They're on their cell phone and they're saying things like, I'm listening, or you're busy typing and you're saying, talk to me. I've just got to send this email, but you're not actively listening. You're passively listening. You're not taking in what you need to take in, because when you truly listen, you need to also observe. Okay. So to me, this is a clear indicator of when we can critique ourselves and say, oh, yeah, sometimes I am guilty, because I've probably been given the feedback before where someone said, you're not listening to me, you're distracted. And that is a sure indicator that you're not taking something into account. So I think what I'm trying to remind us all here with these fundamentals is that as much as we are saying we are trustworthy, we need to start realizing that in some elements and some components, we're actually not. And not because we intently, deliberately wanting to not be trustworthy, is that somebody is reading into something that we are not doing. In other words, if we're not listening to understand, then potentially someone's not going to trust us and want to tell us something. Okay. So think about your partners, your children, work colleagues, suppliers, customers, whoever. You probably all experienced this at some stage. Not probably, you have. So it's something that's very common, but it's something that we need to get better at, and we need to intentionally practice better listening skills. Okay, so that's the first component. The second component is motive. In other words, you can trust someone when you feel their motive is for you and not for themselves. Aha. So let's take politics here. So politicians often get a bad rap before an election because people say, well, where have you been for the last 5 years? You're missing in action. And suddenly before the election, then the politicians are quickly passing through legislation, or they're running around the community, reminding the community how wonderful they are. So you've got this sense of, so they're only coming to show an interest and care for me because it's election time and they want the votes. Okay. But you can apply this to many, many elements in your life. You pick up that person's only doing this for selfish reasons. So you ask yourself, what is the motive? Why is the person asking me to do this? Is it for them? Is it for me? Is it a win-win solution? Is it a win-lose situation? So it's a really helpful component to take into account. And guess what? In most cases, because your gut tells you that something is not as it should be in this situation. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way because we implicitly want to trust somebody and they let us down. and we realize actually their motive in this situation or this relationship or in this contract or this project was about the tension on them and not the team. So that we're focusing on getting all the credit instead of sharing the credit with the entire team. The third one is ability. This was interesting. So ability is you can trust someone when you feel they have the ability or capacity to guard and deliver results for what you have trusted them. Okay, so ability is your know-how and your skill to do something. So we tend to believe, well, if someone's studied to be a pilot or a doctor, that they're going to be able to fly an aeroplane or to be able to operate on me. So I've got more of a trust in someone than in those two roles than someone who has had no qualification in flying an airplane. I'm going to go, no, thank you very much. Okay. So where do we get the ability from? It often comes from a qualification or from experience. So we often will tend to default to someone with more experience and more know-how and more knowledge rather than someone that has no background or no experience or know-how. Okay, it's not always true, but we have a default that we feel more comfortable when we know that somebody has experience in whatever the concept or the topic might be. So you see, it's not the fault of somebody. You see that it's just the qualification, the skill, or the experience the person has had that we will trust them more. Okay. So in the other elements of trust, they may not feature. But in this one, we go, oh, no, but I'd rather go with this person because I can see that, let's just say you're doing some renovating at home, that they have some references and or they've got some images of previous work that they've done versus somebody that's just started out as a contractor and they've got no past clients. That's risky, isn't it? You're going to then weigh up the risks, whether I'm going to go with this person or I'm going to go with someone that's probably got some experience. The fourth component of trust is character. Okay, so I've got a lovely quote here, image of Martin Luther King. I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I'm sure you've heard that quote many a time. So we very much feel that we can judge people's character. And it's probably come out of your mouth, or you've heard somebody else say something like, bring the person to me and I will judge their character. Now that's actually completely flawed because you're only using, what criteria are you using to judge somebody's character? You are using your background, your story, your upbringing, your morals, your values. Okay, so it's not an accurate science at all. So you can trust someone who has the character, personal makeup needed for what you entrust them with. So it depends on what it is, isn't it? Okay. So you're going, well, on this perspective, I can trust someone because of maybe their knowledge or their character, or I like what they say, or I'm aligned to their belief system, their morals, their religion, their political ideology. So I'm going to vote for that party because I like the leader. So you're going to link yourself to someone who you see a connection with. Okay, so there's powerful science and neuroscience behind this, where we like to align ourselves with somebody that is similar or looks like us or thinks like us. It makes us feel more comfortable. However, as I said, it could be completely flawed, okay, because maybe you haven't done enough research, or maybe you need to say, but why do I always align myself with people like this? Is it simply because we're from the same culture, the same religion, the same gender, the same school, the same community? That might not necessarily be the best thing. And then the fifth one is the track records. Okay, proven track records. So there is a link between, someone's ability because they have the skill or the knowledge or the experience or the qualification. But the track record is you can trust someone who has a track record for performing in the ways you need them to perform. But what does that mean? So I would like a history, or I would like someone who knows what they're doing from past experience. And if I've used them before, I would potentially like to use them again. So these are the 5 components that Henry Cloud unpacks in his book: understanding, motive, ability, character, and proven track record. So hopefully it's given you some insight into, once again, the complexity of trust. Over and above that, you've got to ask yourself this question: are you the problem? Houston, we have a problem. So it could be you, could be me, David, who is perhaps lacking in some of those. Or when we look at the equation, I have an inability to trust other people. So I need to go and do some work, some inner work, some self-reflection. I need to go under the water, analogy of the iceberg. I need to go under the water. It's cold, it's dark, it's scary. And instead of blaming others, I need to go and do some work on me to find out why I am holding back, or why I'm supposedly always choosing the wrong person. Whether it's from a team dynamic, or I'm backing the wrong person, or in a relationship, I'm always picking the person that leads to an unhealthy relationship. So those are the components of trust. But it's also good to tackle trust issues. Okay. So let's look at some of these issues that we all face. So if you look at these, it might be all of them, or 1 or 2 might jump out at you. And those are the ones that you need to go and investigate and explore further. So the first one here is the fear of depending on someone. So this can be aligned to all sorts of things: your social style, your personality, your lived experience, your past experience, your upbringing, having gone through previously a difficult relationship, and in most cases it's linked to our upbringing, trauma and our upbringing. Remember, trauma, no one escapes trauma. There's definitely varying degrees of trauma. But in most cases, psychologists will tell us that there's a link to something we experienced in growing up. So fear of depending on someone. So I can only rely on me. I can't rely on anybody else, maybe because of a past experience. The fear of being controlled. Okay, huge one. I'm independent. I will not be controlled by another person. So if I extend trust, or I'm reliant on somebody, it means that I am unable to control the situation. Fear around imperfection. Okay, Brené Brown has done amazing work on this topic. Shame and badness. In other words, the good news for the bad news for the perfectionist is there ain't no such thing as perfection. There is betterment and there's an improvement. And it is unattainable perfection, and it just sets you up for failure because you're never going to achieve it, and you're going to be highly demanding on other people. So we tend not to then trust other people and have a sense of shame, or that we're bad. So once again, back to self-reflection, back to analogy of the iceberg. I and David need to go and do some self-work, some inner work to identify where this is coming from. Trauma and inequality is another reason why we don't trust, as linked to all of the above. Something could have happened in my past, or I feel inferior, or I feel less than another human being, I need to go and tackle that. Why am I feeling this? Why, when I meet someone, do I feel that I'm less than or they are better than me? They might come across with tendencies to indicate that they claim to be better, because they'll say things like, "Do you know who I am?" Or "I am wealthy," or "I am famous," and you are less than that. And that's something you need to go and tackle. That's their story. And then finally, just fears around oneself. And those are all our personal issues and fears that we need to tackle. They exist, they're there, but they come from somewhere. They don't just magically arrive from nowhere. Okay? There are there are things that we need to go and investigate and explore. So it's important to understand elements. So we've done the components of trust. We've done the trust equation. We've looked at the trust issues. But let's be real. Trust is going to be broken at some stage. In a work environment, with a colleague, with a team member, with a line manager, with a client, with a customer, supplier. And fortunately, as much as trust is something that's fundamental, it can be repaired. Now, the challenge with repairing trust is that it's not easy. Okay. And I'm going to hopefully just give you some guides, some guidance around how you can potentially repair trust once it has been broken. But those of you who've been in any relationship and the trust has been broken, we tend to not want anything to do with that person again. We will try, if we can, to not engage with that person again. However, a lot of the times you can't, because the person works with you or they live with you under your roof. Think about a partner, think about your children. So fortunately, as human beings, we have this innate willingness or wanting for things to be repaired. We don't know how. It's like healing. It's like the other very interesting concept of forgiveness is that we have this innate need to forgive, but we don't know how. We'd love to, but we don't know how. And in many ways, trust is similar. So just here are some tips. Okay, no magic wand again. I'm not here to go, oh, once you do all of this, then trust can be repaired. Think about trust scenarios that you probably would like to resolve or sort out. And some of these might actually give you some indication. The first one is you must acknowledge it. So you need to, the elephant in the room, you need to talk about it. Okay. You need to speak up. You need to confront it. You need to verbalize it. You need to be able to write it down so that it's clear. You may need to apologize and you may need to make amends. So don't be stubborn. Remember, when we forgive somebody else, it's not for the other person, it's for you. So if someone else has wronged you, as we learn in forgiveness, a lot of people are put off by forgiving because they say, but I can release that person from what they've done. No, you're not releasing that person from what they've done. You're actually healing you. Okay, you are dealing with your self-worth and your mental health in order to continue with life. Because if you hang, as we know, if you hang on to the lack of forgiveness, it eats you away. It destroys you. It doesn't destroy the other person. Demonstrate consistent behavior. That shows trust. So you might have the other person, or you might have shown some inconsistency. But as soon as you start showing consistency, that I can rely on you, okay, that you will submit, you have started submitting that report on time, so I don't have to chase you, or that when you have allowed your children to go out, and the curfew is 12 o'clock, that over a series of weekends they have returned within their time. There's the consistency. Okay. Open, honest communication. Oh, remember this one, hey? This comes out in every culture survey and every company that you do is communication, communication, communication. Lack thereof. We need more. So all relationships need open and honest communication. You may also need to set and respect boundaries. Oh, we've done boundaries as a webinar. Powerful stuff. Remember, boundaries, once again, are there to protect you. They're not there for anybody else. You're not putting up boundaries to hurt people, to reject people, to shun people. You're putting up boundaries to protect yourself and to show people where the door is. Okay, you're not putting a wall around you. You're saying, I have a door, and if you want to come visit me, you need to preferably phone me first, or you need to knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and I will decide if I'm going to let you in or not. And then the last bit of advice around reparation or repair is patience. Whoa. Patience and forgiveness. As I said, the forgiveness is it's probably the ultimate thing that we as human beings can do, because you've heard the term, it sets you free, because it really does. Because when we don't forgive, it eats us away. It destroys us away. It destroys us internally. And you forgive, as I said, for you. You don't forgive for the other person. And the same applies if the person refuses to accept your forgiveness, or for you refuses to ask for forgiveness, or is dead. Same applies. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. And I wanted to highlight this point because it's important. Trust repair is complex. It is deeply personal, and it's an individual process. And the specific strategies may vary depending on the situation. Okay, so this is the fine line, the small print. So just because I have explained some guidance or some tips, it's not a magic wand, as I said. So we often have to do a lot of inner work to identify what it is before we can even go on the journey of repairing trust. If we understand the formula, and that there are many components to trust, and analyze each element and maybe take our trust issue that we're thinking about and apply it to that formula. And if we look at the components of trust, those 5 components, and that will give us a good indication of how we're going to resolve it, and look at the different varying options. People rarely give over their trust to institutions. Really, they trust other people. You all work for organizations, or you work for yourself, and have understood that, and I've experienced that too. When I've left an organization, it's often the people that I miss terribly, not necessarily the organization. Okay, so that bond is very important, to have other people that you work with that you can trust. And I saw a wonderful article just yesterday around the importance of actually employees, you become a far better engaged employee if you have healthy relationships at work. If you actually have friends, it says it. If you have a BFF or a friend at work, you tend to be a more engaged person, even if the work and the environment isn't so great. If you've got a mate there, a friend there, it makes you far more effective and far more willing to want to go to work. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I thought a lot about that, because it really, when I thought about my career and going back, as much as I did enjoy some companies I worked with, it was, or in some companies I didn't enjoy, where I gave my all, it was often because of the other people that I worked with. I was part of a team. I enjoyed their company. I socialized with them. And to this day, if I think of my circle of friends, most of them are people that I actually met at work. So we don't no longer work together, but they've become personal friends. So just think about that one too, because some people are still a bit wary about they separate their working world with their personal life. We only have one life. So we shouldn't really be having these little pockets of different lives because you spend so much time at work, don't you? So why would you not be forming bonds and relationships with people in your work environment? Just putting it out there. Now, as we draw to an end here, because I'm hoping there are going to be some nice juicy questions for me. I found this really, really interesting. What if you could see trusts? So these are 13 examples of, and once again, look at them, because some of them you will relate to, and others you will see as important, and some you may not see as important, and some you might see yourself as realizing, oh, I'm actually, David might be lacking in some of these. I need to do some inner work, perhaps, or not. Okay. So you can actually, in other words, you can actually see trust. And what does that look like? The first one is talk straight or straight talking. So what that means is that when you know where you stand with somebody, even if you might not like it, it tends to be a healthier trust relationship because there's no confusion or misunderstanding. Okay, so I've learned that I'm trying to be a better straight talker because I like to waffle, beat around the bush, long story. And in that, sometimes people get confused or they might go, I'm not really sure what he's getting at. So straight talking is clarity. However, if you're a straight talker, just be aware of how you say stuff, because sometimes it might come across as too direct or too harsh. Okay, that's number one. So some of you will already be nodding your heads and acknowledging that. The second one is demonstrate respect. We see that all the time. You see that all the time. Somebody that shows respect to other people. It doesn't matter what level they're at, what title they have, how much money they have. If you treat everybody the same, we seem to go, we like that person. But if you notice that someone only talks to someone that's more important, or has credentials, or has status, or has money, but they talk differently to someone that doesn't, then that should be the alarm bells going off.
David,
Transparency.
sorry.
Yes.
Are you meant to be sharing your screen at the moment, or do you have it off?
Yes, I am. Is it off?
It's off. We can't see your presentation.
Sorry. It decided to switch itself off. Sorry, guys. Right, there we go. So back to number 3, transparency. So we tend to be more open when things are transparent in an organization and in a relationship. As soon as we suspect that people are withholding information or that we haven't been told, then we tend to be wary. And, one very controversial transparency component in organizations is the sharing of salaries. Now, there's some organizations, it's easier to do it when you do it from scratch. So when you start an organization, you say, okay, salary brackets are completely transparent. Everyone knows what everyone's earning. Versus most organizations, whoa, it's top secret. Okay. You might have brackets or levels in which you are pegged. Okay. But very few people know what other people are earning, and it's actually frowned upon. And people can actually be disciplined in most organizations if you talk about salary. However, that's what's often led to the pay gaps and pay disparity between males and females, because stuff can be hidden when things aren't transparent. So I'm just putting that out there. Okay. Another one is righting wrongs. You can see when people right wrongs, immediately there's a sense of trust. If someone actually comes forward and apologizes and admits that they did something wrong, there's something in that because somebody is owning up. Show loyalty. we're loyal to each other. That instills trust. Okay. When people deliver results, that's quite obvious. So if you set someone a target, they reach it, they meet it, then we feel that we can trust that person. Or when people get better at something. So maybe it's even that you might have disciplined them, or they might be new, and you can see that they're trying and they're making progress and they're getting better. So they're moving. Then we go, oh, I'm liking the trust component here. It could be about confronting reality. That's an interesting one. So being real about the elephant, or raising the issue that's maybe exists in the work environment or in the family home, and talking about it instead of pretending it doesn't exist and sweeping it under the carpet. Clarify expectations. Okay. Yep. Clarify expectations is, say, you set expectations, and people are clear. If you don't have expectations, we don't know where we stand or where we sit. Okay. Practice accountability. We've learned a lot in leadership and in management, that when someone is responsible or someone is accountable, we need to own up to it. We've seen this lacking in politics, where someone is accountable for a department and there's corruption, then the head doesn't resign. We blame somebody else. Okay. Listen first. How's that for good management leadership skill? Listen to people before you give your view and your opinion. Keep commitments. Oh, and that also can be directly linked to personalities and social styles. Okay. For some people, a commitment is everything. They ain't going to budge. For other people, it's fluid. So I said I'm going to come at this time, but actually 10 minutes before, I'm postponing, canceling a meeting. And you're like, no, we committed to 10 o'clock on this day, but the other person is like, no, I've got too much on my plate today. Can we postpone it? For one person, that's fine, and for other person, that's not. So do you see how that in itself will show you that you think I'm trustworthy, but the other person thinks you're not, simply because you didn't stick to your commitment. And you're going, but it's not serious. It doesn't matter. Why are you so set in your ways? Why are you so stuck in the mud? What difference does it make? Okay. And then the last one is extending trust. Okay, so when we extend trust, the chances are that I'm also going to be able to extend my trust. So if you offer trust to me, the chances are I'm going to trust you more. Okay, so I really found that this was really helpful to realize that you can actually see trust, and it's lovely to unpack with a family, with a team, that this is what we're looking for. This is really the language or the DNA or the actions or the behavior. That's the right word. The behavior that we actually want to see within our team. And if you look through this list, you might then realize what's perhaps lacking from a trust perspective, because maybe you're doing a couple of these, but when it comes to the others, you're not. So there's no straight talking taking place, or there's no transparency. So you wonder why there's a lack of cohesiveness, perhaps in your team. And like all my webinars and workshops, whenever we're exposed to new information and new content, we must not see the person on the left there, where it becomes too much. It's overwhelming. I don't know where to start. Okay. Just start somewhere. As Brené Brown says, just show up. So the person on the right, they're making little teeny weeny steps and they're moving. And I bring the slide in everything that I do, because it just reminds us, because then I have the sense of I'm moving. I'm not lost. I'm not stuck, even though it might take me a lot longer. I am getting somewhere. Right. So that is my story. And I've managed to give us 5 minutes to tackle any questions that may have arisen. So if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. And I know often we have to process what we learn. But I hope I planted a lot of seeds in your head, and to make us reassess and relook at the complexity of trust, and realize that I also play a huge role in what I do and what I offer when it comes to trust. So please, would love to hear some questions or statements around trust. Just wanted to share my details. If you want to engage with me, I'll pop them up on the screen. But as I said, you will get access to this presentation. But I really encourage you to pull out one or two things to go and apply. So what I would like you to do, if you're not going to ask any questions, is to just pop in the chat maybe, because we're a nice big group. One thing that you would like to go and apply, practice, explore further when it comes to trust, and pop that in the chat. And why that's so helpful to do is because it's actually psychologically, it helps you to better commit to it if you actually type it. And it might trigger something else in somebody else's brain by seeing what you are going to commit to. No one's going to check on you, but take one component of what we've chatted today and pop it in the chat. I want to see the chat looking very busy and active. Right, so I have some questions. Julia, trust is a deep aspect and not easy to move from not trusting to trust. The person who has to make constant efforts to work on this. Absolutely. How do you repair trust when, this is from Adrian, how do you repair trust when there's a continued issue regarding someone's trustworthiness? Regardless how one tries to sort the issue out, every time there seems to be a different curveball highlighting the issue. So that's a very good question. So boundaries are one aspect of that. Having a direct conversation. Previously, I ran a session on having a difficult conversation. And difficult conversation means you have to say it how it is, and it has to be, this is the last resort before we follow let's say a formal process within an organization. Because if someone, as you say, chopping and changing and keep on coming with different curveballs, there seems to be a victim mentality there around not taking accountability. And I know I don't know the whole scenario here, but not taking accountability for their actions and blaming the company, society, personal problems, but they're not owning anything. Okay. So I hope that helps slightly, Adrian. Please all try to improve on my listening. Thank you. Keep commitments, Renette. I love you all to just pop one thing into the chat that you would like to take and apply in your whole life. Remember, we're not just talking work, we're talking about your whole life, at home, in your social gatherings, with your friends, with your family, and in the work environment, and with your team. Keep the chats coming in, please. Those of you who need to leave, thank you very much for your participation. And for spending this hour with me, and hopefully we will be able to go forth and use what I have imparted today. So thank you very much. I will hang around if anyone's got any more questions, or I would love to just read your comments about what trust component you'd like to commit to. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure, Shelley. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yes, your presentation will be shared with you. You'll all be sent the presentation, and go forth and do some inner work and go and practice trust. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.